Stop me if you've heard this before. A star quarterback that is very disgruntled with his team decides to remove all mention of this team from his social media account. Now, here's the kicker. This star quarterback didn't get drafted 3 years ago, and this star quarterback has made it to the Super Bowl and has won a Super Bowl with his current head coach. As a matter of fact, this head coach has been quoted multiple times crediting this star quarterback for the fact that he still has a job. So there's a lot to dive into here. It's very ambiguous and very interesting. So before we get to the content, we are giving away $500, another $500 to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. We're also giving away $500 to a follower on my Instagram page at The Flight Mike. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? We've covered the Russell Wilson situation very extensively on this channel, whether it was last year or this year, and I warned you guys, if the Seattle Seahawks had a bad ending to their season this year, you may see Russell Wilson on his way out. Now look, I'm gonna give it to you really straight. There are very few teams that would be an upgrade over the Seattle Seahawks' current situation, because the Seattle Seahawks have a ton of cap space. They could sit pat and improve their team tremendously this year, which is also why a rebuild kind of sounds attractive as well. You have to bear in mind that if the Seattle Seahawks want to do what Pete Carroll's suggesting that they do, which if you aren't familiar with this drama, let me give you a brief history lesson. In what is now a 1-year-old article that is still relevant as hell today, that I've cited multiple times throughout my content because it is really relevant. There was foreshadowing to this exact same problem this past year. The main part of this article that is called "What is Driving the Rift Between Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks? Power and Control," you'll see that my favorite quote from this entire article is, "Pete Carroll has built Hall of Fame credentials on what he sees as quote-unquote simple truths about how the game is best played. Run the ball, avoid turnovers, explode in the passing games." Pete Carroll explains that it is not because we just want to knock our head against the wall, it is because the game is played well when you don't give the other team the football, the game is played well when you convert and make first downs, and the game is played well when you can explode on offense. And to Pete Carroll's credit, he has won when he was implementing this exact philosophy. But in contrast, when you compare this to Russell Wilson's predicament, he feels like Pete Carroll's conservative philosophy is limiting his production and by extension, his ambitions to be one of the game's all-time greats. If you remember in the first half of the 2020 season, not the 2021 season, but the 2020 season, the term "let Russ cook" has been running rampant. This was the point where Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf established that there's one route that DK Metcalf runs really freaking well, and that's some variation of the go route. More or less, whenever Russell Wilson targeted DK Metcalf on deep balls, more times than not, the result would be very successful. Their chemistry has gotten so freaking good that they started inventing interesting routes together, and ultimately that spelled a lot of success during the beginning of the 2020 season. He had the best statistical stretch of his career according to this article, and things were going well until they lost to the Buffalo Bills 44-34 on November 8th, where Russell Wilson turned the ball over 4 times and the defense wasn't necessarily the best against Josh Allen. As a result of this one game, Pete Carroll dedicated an entire practice to turnovers. And what do the best head coaches do? Well, if you get your kicked by a championship contending team, you need to pivot your philosophy. So that's what Pete Carroll did. He decided that he needed a more balanced offense. As a result of this, Russell Wilson's statistics wouldn't look nearly as prolific. Eventually, this would result in a lot of tense meetings between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, because now on top of everything, on top of the fact that Russell Wilson wasn't performing as well, the Seattle Seahawks were also losing. And whenever you lose, there tends to be a lot more tense meetings that come with that. And this all applies to this year, only magnify the fact that the Seattle Seahawks were losing primarily because Russell Wilson was out during the first part of the year, and by the time he came back, the margin of error was so tiny and they were in such a competitive division that it really didn't matter anymore. Ultimately, as a result, we're seeing part 2 of this entire situation, where Russell Wilson is kind of implying that he wants to leave the Seattle Seahawks with what he's doing on social media. Now look, look, we covered a situation very similar to this, with Kyler Murray unfollowing the Arizona Cardinals and completely scrubbing his entire social media feed of everything that pertains to the Arizona Cardinals. So this is familiar territory, and when we did discuss that, the question was, is this something that is a big deal, or is this something that can be ignored? Ultimately, it was a big deal. There were issues within the Cardinals organization, and this was Kyler Murray's passive way of saying that he isn't happy. Ultimately, that situation got settled, and now it seems like those two sides mended fences. With Russell Wilson, however, the situation's a little different. It seems like they tried their best to make it work with Russell Wilson, and it just wasn't meant to be this past year. There were multiple times where Pete Carroll said that we need to run the ball a little bit more, while Pete Carroll also would kind of hint at criticizing Russell Wilson. He would also say Russell Wilson is a huge reason why he still has a job, which is true, by the way. Pete Carroll has had other jobs in the past. He coached the New England Patriots during the Drew Bledsoe era, and ultimately he found himself back in the college ranks when that wasn't successful before getting his job with Seattle. Now, here's the report from today. It's the fact that Russell Wilson took out quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks from his bio on his Twitter page. He also removed the picture of him in a Seattle Seahawks jersey and any mention of the Seattle Seahawks on his Twitter page as well. Now look, man, this could be an absolute nothing burger, or this could be something. So let's dive into this. On top of this, I think it's important to sandwich this information together. According to Jordan Schultz, the Colts owner Jim Irsay is a huge Russell Wilson fan and would love to trade for him. And Ian Rappaport confirms the fact that the Indianapolis Colts are doing whatever it takes to move on from Carson Wentz and get an upgrade at the quarterback position, much like they've been doing for the past 4 years, if we're being honest. Now you might be thinking,
oh my God, Mike, they don't have a first round pick this year.
Yeah, but they do have second round picks. They have first round picks in the future. And if the Indianapolis Colts really want to pursue a quarterback like Russell Wilson, I do think they could potentially make a trade. I mean, if the Los Angeles Rams could trade for Matthew Stafford, I think the Indianapolis Colts will have the means to trade for Russell Wilson, although it would absolutely gut their team of first round picks for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, the Seattle Seahawks would be placed in a remarkable position to rebuild. I mean, with all those first round picks, you're selling on one of the best QBs in the league right now, who might be regressing at this point. It does make a lot of sense to move on from Russell Wilson if that opportunity presents itself. The only thing that this hinges on is the fact that they need to sell Russell Wilson on becoming an Indianapolis Colt. And to be honest, I don't think that's that difficult of a sell. They have a remarkable defense. They have a tremendous offensive line. They could use some help in their wide receiver core, but they also have a lot of cap space and, of course, Jonathan Taylor. So I don't think it's that tough of a sell for Russell Wilson. It would definitely be a situation where I think offensively he'll perform a little bit better, and I think that'd be a win-win trade for both sides. But I also wanted to make sure you guys know this, because it is my responsibility to let you know that the media was blowing up the Russell Wilson story today. And when I go to his Instagram, he changed his Instagram profile picture to a picture of him on the Seattle Seahawks so you could put this entire situation to bed. Needless to say, I do think Russell Wilson is a player that's very likely to be traded. You've been hearing it from Ian Rappaport. You've been hearing it from multiple sources all around the league. And I honestly would like to see him on the Indianapolis Colts, but it depends on how willing the Seahawks are to make such a trade. I don't think Pete Carroll would want such a trade because, like he said this past year, Russell Wilson's a huge reason why this man still has a job. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this man. What do you think is going to happen to Russell Wilson? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.